Okay, Leader, we're live.
Thank you very much. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Cabinet. Before we formally start the meeting, I'll go to each councillor present in turn to confirm hear and be heard. This is a legal requirement for virtual meetings. Where practicable, please also have your video switched on so that you can be seen by those in attendance and the public watching. I will begin with Cabinet members. Councillor Felicity Norman.
Hello everybody, yes, present and able to hear, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ellie Chowns.
Thanks, Leader. Yes, I can hear and see you.
Councillor Pauline Crockett.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I can see and hear you.
Councillor Gemma Davis.
Afternoon, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Councillor John Harrington.
Leader, I can see and hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Liz Harvey.
I can see and hear you.
And Councillor Ange Tyler.
Yes, good afternoon, Leader. Yes, I can hear and see you. Thank you.
We have some Cabinet support members this afternoon. Councillor John Hardwick.
Good afternoon, Leader. I can see and hear you clearly.
Councillor Peter Ginman.
Good afternoon, Leader. I can see and hear you.
And Councillor Alan Selden.
Yes, good afternoon, Leader and everyone. I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Group leaders are also present.
Leader?
Yes.
Jenny Bartlett.
By the way, I can see and hear you too.
Yes, I'm sorry. You were down as having provided your apology. Sorry about that. Okay, so group leaders, beginning with Councillor Terry James. Councillor Terry James, you were here earlier. Yeah.
You're muted, Councillor
James.
Sorry, Leader. I can see and hear you. And thank you for sending the email last night. I made the mistake of looking at the and not noticing that the item had been withdrawn.
Yes, yes.
Saved some of us a lot of time.
Good, thank you. Councillor Jonathan Lester.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I can see and hear you. Thank you.
Councillor Bob Matthews.
Yes, I can see and hear you, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Trish Marsh.
Yes, Leader, I can hear and see you. Thanks.
And then the scrutiny chairs, Councillor Carol Gowrie.
Yes, Leader, I can see and hear you.
And Councillor Alyssa Swinglehurst.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I can hear and see you.
We also have a number of officers attending who will be introduced as they are called upon. Thank you. I'll now formally open the meeting. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and making an official recording. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Microphones should be muted when you are not speaking. Please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meetings, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. As we move through the agenda, in addition to discussion by Cabinet members, I will invite group leaders and their representatives in turn to provide views and questions from their group on each item. Where appropriate, I will also call on scrutiny chairpersons to comment on behalf of their committee. Voting will be undertaken electronically using the voting software within the virtual meeting platform. Only Cabinet members may vote. An electronic log of voting choices selected by Cabinet members will be kept. If the vote is unanimous, it will be recorded as such in the minutes. If the vote is not unanimous, a record of the voting choices of each Cabinet member will be published as an appendix to the formal minutes of the meeting. In the event of a technical failure, I will ask each Cabinet member by means of a roll call to indicate if they are for, against, or are abstaining. If a Cabinet member has not been present for the whole of the discussion on an item due to technical failure, they should not vote on that item. Item Agenda 7, to set out the Council's preferred waste collection model and to agree the implementation plan for the new waste management service, has been withdrawn from today's agenda so that further work can be done on this really important project before it comes to Cabinet again. The Cabinet member commissioning procurement and assets has approved the Executive's response to the recommendations from the Scrutiny Committee under a separate decision, and this has been published on the council website. It would be quite wrong of me at this meeting not to mention the deeply disturbing judgment which has been handed down by Mr. Justice Keehan last Friday. For the limited number of officers and councillors who have known about this case for a number of weeks, it has cast a dark shadow over our work. For those who heard for the first time on Friday, it has cast such a shadow. On behalf of the council, I have apologised unreservedly to the family affected by the appalling failings identified by Mr. Justice Keehan. The latest judgment shows that the previous steps taken to make improvements in children's services fell short of what is required to protect and safeguard the children of Herefordshire. We have to do much better in future. The monitoring officer has called an extraordinary meeting of council for next Tuesday, the 27th of April, to agree actions to improve these services. Papers for that meeting are available on the council website. You have my assurance that we will be working hard to ensure we protect and safeguard the children of Herefordshire. I would like to thank members of the public who have submitted questions for the meeting. This will help us to have a full and frank discussion about how we can improve our children's services. Turning now to the items on the agenda. First of all, apologies for absence. I think we've received one apology from Yolandi Watson. Have any other apologies been provided?
No, I have no other apologies other than that, Leader. No apologies from members of the Cabinet. We've had apologies from Claire Ward and Stephen Vickers on the officer side.
Thank you. Item 2, declaration of interest. Are there any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or other interests for items on the agenda today? I see none, but Councillor Jim, you do have your hand raised. I think this might be because you have to leave a bit early.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, unfortunately, fortunately, I'm due to have my COVID jab this afternoon, and it's just been told there's a spare dose at the surgery and they've just called me to go and get it. So I will be leaving early.
Okay, thank you. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 25th of February. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer, so I will ask Cabinet members to confirm that they agree the minutes by an electronic vote. Non-voting attendees will be moved to a breakout room for a few moments. They will be automatically returned to the main room when all eligible votes have been cast. Please can non-voting attendees now be moved out of the main room and the number of voting members be confirmed.
Chairman, there are 8 voting members.
Thank you.
You should be able to vote now.
Cabinet members, please cast your vote either for, against or abstain. Please ensure you press submit after selecting the option.
Chairman, all votes are in. I have 7 for to approve the minutes and 1 abstention.
Thank you. You'll bring everybody back in. So we move now to item 4, to receive questions from members of the public. Members of the public have the opportunity to submit questions to Cabinet in writing ahead of the meeting. We've received 8 questions for this meeting and responses have been published as a supplement to the agenda papers. Those who have submitted questions have been given the opportunity to submit a written supplementary or to send an audio or video recording or to join the meeting to ask their question live. I will now ask the clerk to confirm how any supplemental questions are to be received. The first questioner is Mr. Butler, and his question regards Bromyard. And the Cabinet member is Councillor Harrington, I think. Do we have a supplemental question?
Thank you, Leader. If I can just note, I think I've had a couple of messages saying that the link to the pack of questions on the website doesn't work. I'm just checking the individual links within the on the web page, and the individual items do have the questions attached to them. It's just the pack at the top that seems to not include those. I will try and correct that, but the responses are there, and I know that members of the public have received them. So as I say, I will try and correct that as we go. So the first supplementary question from Mr. Butler, I've not received any supplementary question. I do have a supplementary question from Mr. Harwood for question 2.
Fine, if we can see that.
Share, please.
Mr. Harwood's question related to the Green Book and how this might apply to developments in Ross.
So Mr. Harwood's supplementary question is, it is noted a much needed business park in Ross has to fall within the priorities of the council. Excluding the obvious large-scale residential development in the town, can the council please share what it lists as the top 3 strategic priorities for Ross?
I think this might be a question either for you, Councillor Harrington, or for Councillor Chowns, based on the information we're gathering at the moment.
I think it's a supplemental to a question that was directed to me, Leader, so I'm happy to take it.
Thank you.
Since Market Town economic development falls within my portfolio, and as mentioned in the answer to the original question, the Herefordshire Council is currently engaged in in-depth piece of project development work, essentially, with each of the market towns, including with Ross, which is specifically designed to identify what are the economic development priorities for that town. It's not something that we as Herefordshire Council would decide without consultation with local people, and indeed been a number of opportunities for local people to feed into that process. As the original response said, this work is anticipated to come to an end soon. We're aiming for the end of May, and at that point we will then be able to identify opportunities to take forward specific projects.
Thank you, Councillor Chowns. Moving on then to Mrs. Probert. Her question was directed to me. I don't know whether there's a supplemental question.
No, we've not received any supplemental question for that one, Leader. And just to save you, we don't have any other supplementary questions other than for the last public question, question 8, and Mrs. Albright is going to join us to ask her question.
Thank you. If you'd like to
save
bring her in, that would be good.
Okay, Leader, Miss Albright should be with us now.
Okay. And this subject is the very important one of phosphates in our rivers. Miss Albright.
I am here, Leader.
I'm looking to see.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Yes, yeah. Yes, you're in the middle of the screen now.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for the reply to my question, and my apologies for remaining a repetitive thorn in all of your sides. I must admit that even I am beginning to run out of interesting questions to ask you about phosphates. The lobby group would be very grateful if you were able to reconsider the burden and balance of risk, especially in light of the government stating recently that preventing and delaying housing planning approvals is not a sustainable position for Herefordshire. The government has also confirmed that Herefordshire Council is able to deviate from the Natural England advice, providing they have good reasons for doing so. I wonder, is now the right time to put this into motion? Herefordshire Council does have strong scientific evidence to show that new housing is not a likely significant effect upon the protected environment, especially where a private drainage system might be utilised. We also, or rather you also, have a very good range of mitigation options on the horizon, which will be in place well before new homes built now would be occupied. The lobby group do appreciate that Herefordshire Council have allocated funding and invested significant effort. However, sadly, we still don't have access to any of these solutions or indeed the promised phosphate calculator. We are not aware of any technical or legal way for our applications to secure approval once they have even had chance to use the calculator or choose a mitigation option. Do councillors know when the calculator may be ready for us to use? Please rest assured that I will keep asking the agencies and the MPs to support the council going forward. But maybe, and this is how I feel, maybe it is time to lift the de facto moratorium and to help get the local construction sector working and contributing to the county once again. Thank you.
Councillor Harrington.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Albright, and we appreciate all the efforts of the Construction Industry Lobby Group. You have been put in a very difficult position and you have lost a considerable amount of income and finance to this county. Everything you've said is agreeable, makes sense to me, but what we have to do is we as a local authority have to take the risk. And it is always, I wouldn't say interesting, but it's always a source of frustration when government officials give advice which is not binding advice, when we know in reality that it is Herefordshire Council that will carry the risk if we give permissions against, essentially against the non-permission, the non-statutory consent from agencies such as Natural England. It just makes it a very difficult situation. However, we have to at some point consider that risk of potential JR to the council at a later state from all sorts of people against the damage being done to the local industries, to our tourism. And it is with that in mind that I made that offer for you to come to speak to us as a matter of urgency. I've already asked for further legal advice to be taken on this. And I think that your input into that will help us to ask the right questions to determine risk, because essentially what we're looking at now, aside from everything else we're doing and trying to make sure that the government fulfills its duties, because let's not forget that the Environment Agency is a responsible body for the rivers that are affected. And it is very difficult for us as a council to be doing everything that we can, but be essentially powerless against the statutory bodies and the government agencies that should be doing this. But we can make this assessment of risk, because it's come to the point now where we have to decide the damage that's being done is so great that we have to decide whether or not we take that risk as a council. And so I'm happy to have that conversation, and we'll set that up ASAP.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Albright, for coming forward again. And it's good that you're so interested and passionate about this, and hopefully we can deliver something before very too long. Thank you. I think you will now be moved out of the room. Thank you. Next item 5, is to receive questions from councillors, and we have received one question from Councillor Shaw. I don't know whether there is a supplemental, Sarah.
Yes, Councillor Shaw has sent through a written supplementary question, so I'll just share that for you now. Councillor Shaw says, a year ago tomorrow, Council published a decision to purchase the Maylord Shopping Centre. Can the Cabinet member confirm how many years it will be before a business plan for the future development of the property will finally be published?
Councillor Davis.
I'll ignore the little dig because it's a Thursday and it's sunny outside. But certainly we are doing the strategy for Maylords, and I anticipate it being ready this year.
Thank you you very much. So I'll now move on to item 6, which is the substantive item on this agenda. So this is about Herefordshire's capital investment strategy for specialist settings for educating children and young people with special education needs and disabilities, otherwise called SEND. And the request is to approve this approach for the years 2021 to 2030. And if I may, I will pass this over to Councillor Norman, in whose portfolio this falls.
Thank you, Leader. So Cabinet is being asked to support the proposals in this capital investment strategy for children and young people with special needs and disabilities. And it's an across the county strategy. We have a duty to provide sufficient quality accommodation for children with special needs and to provide the best possible education and specialist support, enabling them to achieve their full potential and to transition to adulthood and achieve the maximum possible independence as in that process. So this strategy will be part of an overarching capital strategy for all schools, and we've discussed this fairly recently, and we've seen how important the quality of educational accommodation is for all children, but even more important for children with special needs, so that equality of opportunity can be guaranteed, potential realised, and achievement and development maximised. Specially designed quality buildings will support and enhance the excellent work already being done by our school leaders and staff. And as you'll see from the report, it also conforms to the aspirations we have within our local plan to achieve the best possible outcomes for our children and young people and for vulnerable people, and our efforts to minimise the possible damaging impacts on the environment. So I'll ask Sue Woodrow to take us through the report. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Councillor. Kerry, would you like to do a brief description from the leadership team?
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Norman. A very brief introduction from me, folks, and then I'd like to hand, if I may, again briefly to Les Knight and then onwards to Sue. This is a proposal around the special school estate that the council has around the county. There are 5 special schools with a 6th to come, the 6th being Beacon College, and a whole strategy around that development is included here. Not all special schools are the same. They serve different disabilities, of course. So the strategy here is to improve the stock of the estate in one of our schools while supporting the development of the new free school Beacon College, which is a post-16 special school for multiple disabilities already being built, but in Hereford City. So, Sue, with your permission, I'll hand quickly over to Les Knight for a brief introduction on the strategy, and then back to you, Sue, for the detail around this, if I may. Thank you. Les, you okay?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think Councillor Norman introduced it very well and covered most of the points I wanted to make, but I think the strategy is our roadmap for the next 10 years. It covers special schools, specialist resource bases, for example, in mainstream schools for autism, and it also covers some other areas such as the pupil referral service. So it takes each type of need in turn and looks at what might be required, and it also tries to provide a priority order in which we will operate, and that is helpful in the sense that sometimes we get government grants for capital for this purpose, and instead of being reactive to that, we can already have a plan as to where that resource might be best used. So I think without further information, I'll pass over to Sue. Kerry, is that?
Yeah, thank you, Sue. Thank you, Les.
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks for the opportunity to come and answer questions and to give a brief description of what we've been trying to achieve in order to put this recommendation forward to you. I'm very aware that I've spoken on fairly numerous occasions to quite a lot of the audience today. So I'll keep the description brief, and then probably the best way is to ask any of you to raise questions for further details where needed. Since about 2016, early 2017, late 2016, Les Knight, as head of additional needs, became aware of the pressures on the specialist education system. And we're talking today about those children and young people who require specialist settings, not those within mainstream. So today is all about those who need extra from the mainstream support that's given to some special needs pupils. As Les mentions, we have a range of different provisions within the county, and we have a geographically very rural and very sparsely populated county. So there's obviously a need to think very carefully and to think forward about how we can make sure we've got enough places, and those places are of high quality. We know we've got some excellent teaching and leadership in special needs, but we want to enable those teachers and those leaders to teach in really wonderful settings where children can achieve what they need to achieve, as Felicity has already described. Pressures on places are existing nationally and also within the similar local authorities to Herefordshire, those that we call our statistical neighbours. It's very difficult to forecast for those places because it's obviously not just a matter of the numbers born and working those numbers through to try to anticipate how many places at each age phase we'll need. We also need to look at what's happened in the past, the trend of places needed. We need to look at the picture nationally, and we need to look at the picture within our similar counties, which we do routinely. Nevertheless, it's not an exact science, and we do our best to forecast, but also continually looking at our current numbers and those coming through and adjusting accordingly. From this information gathered, we know that we need to provide a modest increase. We've already addressed the need for an increase in post-16 places. As Felicity alluded to, we have a new special needs college, post-16 college, being built in Hereford City as a result of a bid that we made to the DFE in 2017, which was accepted, and we've been working since then to get in partnership with the DFE to get this built, and the college is due to open in September this year, which is fantastic news. So we're looking at, and we have addressed the numbers situation for post-16. We also need to address an increase that is forecast for coming through from the younger age groups 2 to 16, which is also part of the strategy, as you would have read. In addition to look at capacity needs, we look at the suitability of the spaces and the buildings that we have, and clearly this is a real issue for children and young people with disabilities, where often accommodation and settings and where they actually live and learn are really, really key to their ability to succeed and to make use of their potential. So we look at the suitability of spaces for those children, and we also look at the condition of those spaces and the schools, because often, as with our mainstream schools, they're quite dated and tired and need investment. So we look at those three broad elements. We decided at that point in 2017 that in order to make sure that we could maximise any government grants that would be coming forward by having a clear plan and a clear set of information so that we could apply to grants as they came forward. We also needed to make sure that we didn't fall short of our statutory responsibility and have no places available for certain young people and children as they came forward. We also needed to make sure that we manage the budget that comes forward for special needs. It's called the High Needs Block, and it is always difficult to manage the pressures of commissioning places and transporting children to those places with the amount of money that comes in annually. So we've got all of those things to make sure that we manage, and the only way really to manage that is not reactively but proactively in terms of having a plan. So we set about starting to construct the plan using all of the information that we have to bring forward some issues and some priorities which we think will need addressing, and also to put forward a range of proposals for how those situations may be resolved. We've consulted along the way, as you'll see in the section on consultation and the appendix 2. And we've also had the benefit of consulting with scrutiny in advance of this meeting, which was extremely helpful. There is a further consultation that is alluded to within the strategy, which you will have read, which no doubt you'll want to ask further questions on, because as part of the strategy, one of the proposals is seeking to improve our first and most important priority, which is Westfield Special School in Leominster, and that special school has poor accommodation, poor suitability, and poor capacity. So as you can see, we really need to support those young people, support that school in giving them a better set of accommodation. However, during that feasibility work, we are proposing that we consult on the necessity to close the sixth form element of Westfield School, which for a range of reasons, but predominantly because we now have the benefit of because of our bid, we have the benefit of the opening in September of a college that will accommodate all of our post-16 students with special needs. And we would need to seek council's view on whether in improving Westfield, it was the right thing or the wrong thing to replace the sixth form provision that they have in a new build, or whether our view would be that those young people can be very well served in the new Beacon College in Hereford City. And there's a whole range of information within the strategy, within the appendices about that proposal, but no doubt that will be something that we will need to discuss, and I'll need to answer questions on as the meeting progresses. So in essence, we have brought forward the background, and Les has kindly put in the beginning of the strategy the service provision information for you to indicate the way in which we look at the commissioning of those children's needs and where they would be receiving their placements. And then further on in the strategy, you'll see the capital elements, which are the proposals on each element of special needs and what we would be looking to do in the next 10 years, largely. As each of those proposals comes forward, clearly there will be further decisions to take, which we're not asking for today, obviously, because we haven't worked up business plans for each of those proposals. And those proposals would come forward with fully costed business plans, as you would expect for any capital project and a bid for investment. Today's meeting is for you to look at the broad spectrum of information within the strategy, to look at the proposals that we put forward, and in essence to agree our approach and agree that the proposals seem sensible and logical, and subject to all of the information being brought forward at each stage, that you would support our work to improve the whole range of settings within Herefordshire for those young people with disabilities. I think that about sums up the overview. Leader, would you like me to just open the floor for questions now, or how would you like to proceed?
Yes, I think we'll have questions, Sue. I think you've covered an enormous amount of material in your introduction, and I think probably answered, or mostly answered, certainly the question which I was going to ask, which is really a concern. There are other councils in the country which have had to be bailed out with their SEND schools, and there's an enormous amount of money has been passed to them, quite rightly. Yeah, we aren't in that position, very fortunately. We don't want to be in that position in the future. So I guess there's a question generally about how robust our projections are. And you've mentioned that you've done the work on that. So I'm not quite sure that I can necessarily ask any particular supplemental questions on that. But it does raise the issue for me as to why we are in the position we're in. The question really for Kerry, I think, as much as anything else, because my understanding is that we have a very good relationship with our mainstream schools, who have a very good approach towards SEND children. There may be some authorities where the SEND people are sort of pushed away as much as possible, but my understanding from conversations I've had is that actually our schools are really very, very good at working together. And I assume trying to keep as many children as possible for their benefit within the mainstream system. So Kerry, that's really a comment.
Yeah,
I think.
you, Leader. You're quite right. Nationally, most councils have overspent on SEND provision, and some of them quite alarmingly, really. I think the biggest overspend is about £40 million. There are 5 councils nationally that have been, I wouldn't say bailed out quite, they've been lent money with some pretty heavy strings to change that came with it, but that's going to take some years to work through. Not true for Herefordshire. I think we're one of only 4 or 5 local authorities that have never overspent on SEND. So well done, Herefordshire. But the pressure on that budget has grown over the last 4 or 5 years. And I would say that this is the first year, for example, we haven't got any contingency left in it. Now that we're not planning to overspend at all this year, but there is very, very little money in any contingency, which is a slight change. Nationally, what happens is that local authorities end up fairly relaxed, too relaxed, I would say, about identifying special educational needs, which means their special schools fill up very quickly, and that puts budgetary pressures on them. What we've done instead locally, and I'll come to Les on a bit more detail on this in a minute, is actually help the mainstream schools keep youngsters with special educational needs and teach them accordingly in their mainstream settings. We know that if money were no object, for example, and we built another special school in the county, it would fill up within seconds. So the strategy has largely been to improve the quality of provision for SEND in mainstream schools. And to be fair on our schools, they've done that remarkably well over the last few years. So well done, county, not overspent. You're quite right, some have overspent alarmingly. There is growing pressure on the budget, though, which is partly what this strategy is trying to address. No contingency this year, which is the first year, I think, for a long time, but no planned overspend either. Can I just invite Les to comment on the overarching strategy, because I'm aware that Les started work on this just before I arrived.
Yeah, okay. The factors that relate to the question of spending, I think that our special schools have been particularly good over the recent history in holding pupils that perhaps other counties have to place in independent and non-maintained schools. And often those places are at as much as double the cost or more, treble the cost locally. So that's one factor in why we've been able to maintain our budget within its limits. The relationship with the number of special school places we have and the need to place externally is important, and it's a really delicate balancing act between having the right number of places but not having too many, because then you haven't got the revenue to fund those special school places. So and I think the other factor we have is a very good schools finance manager who has been able to project forward very successfully, and some counties haven't done that and haven't planned far enough ahead. So we're lucky in that respect as well. So those are all factors in how we've been able to maintain the budget. There's more work to do, I would say, on the relationship between maintaining pupils in mainstream schools and them coming out into specialist provision, and that balance, because again, if too many pupils come out of mainstream, we need many more specialist places at greater cost. So it's all a very delicate balancing act.
I think, Mr. Lovegrove, you've got your hand up. You may well want to mention on the finance.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to add to Les's comments. I want to put on record a thanks to Malcolm Green and his team. It is very much down to his credit that he has helped steer the schools and the wider community to a balanced budget position, and I think we owe him a great debt of gratitude for that. We do actually lend him out, so he has helped other councils as well, because he is regarded as a national expert in these areas.
And of course, we shouldn't be emphasising too much the financial aspect. I think the academic record recently has been very good as well, Kerry. Is that right? We're not keeping people within the schools to the detriment of others.
No, academically, these youngsters perform better than national. There are some sub-cohorts within that, so it's not a black and white picture, but actually they do very well. So the schools work well with these pupils, they do. I'd like to echo Andrew and Les's thanks to Malcolm Green. He's a key player in keeping the budget on the straight and narrow here for us. Thanks.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I'm just going in for questions. So are we going in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of things. Firstly, it's really good about the finance side of it, and I'm really pleased to see about finding that balance between keeping people in mainstream schools and also putting them into special schools, and that we're really trying to work on what that balance should look like. Really happy that with our estates project management, with any school coming forward, as well as the environmental factors, we're taking into consideration what provision can be placed there to ensure that children who could stay in a maintained school is allowed. And that's a really good example at Peter Church, that we're trying to look at different things that could help with mental health, for example. I do think that we're missing out on a trick, and I know I've said this before. I think Herefordshire has so much to offer that we should be building schools that people from out of county can send to Herefordshire, because we're able to offer something really special with open countryside. And right now I know we've got a lot on in children's services, but I would like to see some movement on that moving forward. One of the main question that I've got is, I've read through all of the paperwork and the consultation, and nowhere on the consultation, and it might be me completely missing it, is there anything about talking to the children themselves? So there's lots of stuff about speaking to the parents, there's lots of stuff talking about the educational leaders, all of different people like that, but I can't see where we've spoken to the children themselves. And if we take a criticism, I think one of our biggest criticisms is that we don't speak to the young people enough and ask them what they want from their services. Instead, they have it dictated to them by people who know all of this wonderful terminology. And I would say some of the questions and some of the feedback, there is a consistent message there that this is written for people who know what all of these different words mean. It's not written in plain English. And what I would like us to take a commitment for is, if we're doing anything like this, that there is a copy of the consultation that has been written with children, so that they are able to communicate and engage in that consultation process, because it feels like they're not on this, and it might be that I've missed it, but I don't think I have.
Shall I pick that question
Yes,
up?
please do. So,
yeah. Thanks, Gemma. I appreciate that, and I know that you raised that at scrutiny as well. So that's I really, really have registered that concern. What we try to do is we offer up to the best people to conduct conversations with young people, children and young people, are usually their schools and their parents, particularly when we're talking about high-level plans, which we are at the moment. We're proposing some quite high-level solutions. When it comes to each project that we bring forward, we do have those conversations with young people, and I'll give you a couple of examples. When we received permission to have the benefit of a new DFE built free school for 16 to 19s, we offered up an open forum for children and young people within the SEND community to come along, to listen to the plans and to talk to us about their wishes and their needs. Often those conversations are more productive and fruitful when people that the children know and respect and see every day ask the questions and then feedback to us. Sometimes it's quite daunting, as I'm sure that you're aware, to come into a council building or even their own school and listen to strangers talk about things. But we have had those conversations. We also had an open forum where the contractors came forward and put forward a plan of the new building, asked questions, and parents and were invited to bring children along. We don't often get those children coming along, I've got to say, particularly those with special needs. But also what we've done at Brookfield is we've worked with the head teacher, and she has got a student group set up so that during the process of the build, right from the start, when we've got design teams on site, she's talking to that group of children about what they'd like to see there within their school and what they'd like to see it look like when the project is completed. And we are liaising through the head teacher to those children so that she can be the conduit and she can be the comfortable mediator, I suppose you might say. We've also got written into both of those projects, both the Beacon College and Brookfield, so as one of the social value elements of the contract, the contractors have to be prepared to work with the school and the young people, more importantly, so that we can, if it's relevant, they can talk to young people about apprenticeships, they can talk about work in the construction industry, they can talk about the finishes that they'd like. I mean, I know that colours and tiles and play areas and things like that sound a bit superficial, but often those are the sorts of things that children actually want to hear about. So I come from a teaching background. I'm absolutely on your page with this, and we try as best we can, as soon as we can, when it's appropriate, to get those young people engaged. Sometime when it's a high-level strategic decision about, the needs of numbers of places and accommodation condition and stuff, it's pretty dry and dusty stuff. But when it comes to a project that we're actually then putting forward as an investment opportunity and council have agreed to take that forward, that's the interesting time for children to be engaged and to make those decisions, help us make those decisions.
Yeah, I suppose what I was thinking is, we've heard lots of conversations about people that are doing long journeys, etc. And I know I've shared with you before my personal experience of a young person who they're doing a really long journey and then they get into their school, which is, a long way from Herefordshire. And when they come back, looking at that from an outsider's perspective, you would say that's not right, that child has got to travel that long. It's going to have a major impact on X, Y, and Z. Actually, they're a happier child now. They are progressing incredibly well because the provision we didn't have in Herefordshire is provided somewhere else. So that's part of my thought process. But the other side of it is, when I'd love it to see us engaging way before that when we're talking about strategies, because ultimately it's going to be affecting those children the most. And there's simple processes such as using art. So what if I could go to school, what would my school look like? And you get children doing pictures, and then you can pick out from that pictures, do they want to be in a large group? Do they want to be in a small group? So it'd just be good if we could maybe, and I think it's not just for your area, Sue, I think it's across the council. How do we engage with children and young people better, and make it interesting and not make it dry for them, so that they can create a future for people that are in the same situation as them in years to come. But thank you. That's really exciting about the Brookfield stuff. Really exciting stuff.
Yeah, could I come in and answer Councillor Davis' first point about other children from other areas?
Yes, please do, Les. Yeah.
I mean, legally, we have to offer, if we have places that are not being used, another county wishes to use those, we have to allow those other counties to use those places if they request. This is a particular case with Westfield in the north of the county. We have across the age range about 10 to 13 pupils who come from Shropshire, and we have had dialogue with Shropshire about that. And the main barrier, of course, as it is for us using other counties' provision, is that simply the distance to elsewhere. And I don't think we'd be really advocating for residential accommodation for children unless it's absolutely necessary. So that's probably the most relevant limiting factor.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. I'd like to come back to the point that Councillor Davies touched on just now about the journey times that children are experiencing in travelling to SEND provision. Sometimes it's up to 90 minutes each way, because they're having to travel quite a long way from their home into a centralised provision, because that's what we can afford to do. If we implement this strategy, will the resulting SEND educational provision that we end up with result in a reduced number of long journeys for SEND children in the county? And do you have a view on the kind of provision, based on the kind of provision that we're buying at the moment, what sort of out of county, what sort of SEND provision we are probably not going to be able to provide in Herefordshire. Full stop. You know, where will we be having to, you know, continue to send children out of county in order to access the kind of services that they need?
Can I answer the first bit and then Les can answer the second bit, Leader? Or?
Yes, please do. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Liz. I know that you raised this at scrutiny. It's an important question. I think that there's two elements to this. There's the transport for our children and young people within the county to a school within the county. And there's transport for our children and young people from Herefordshire out to other local authorities for provision that we can't offer. And I think what we do in county supports and counteracts the need for longer journeys to out of county placements. So the strategy in principle, its overarching aim is to retain as many young people with SEND that need specialist settings in county as is at all possible. And Les will talk to you in a minute probably about those children who we can't accommodate because of their particular profound and multiple needs, or the special type of need that they have and we can't offer. But in terms of transport, the strategy, I think, in essence, if adopted, will reduce the numbers of long journeys going out of county ultimately. We can't say how many and we can't say how much that will save, but the principle is that we are trying to reduce the length of journey and the distance of the journey, the cost of the journey ultimately, for children having to travel out. Herefordshire, geographically, as we're all aware, because we all live here, is a county with the benefit of a county town that's slap bang in the middle. So anyone who travels in, approximately, from any peripheral, any border within the county to the city is going to travel about the same distance and time. There are complications, of course, around that with regard to we don't transport each child individually. And what we rely upon is the transport department making the best decisions about the pickups and how we pick children up and how many children are picked up in one swoop. And how many we need to transport individually straight to the location that they need to go to. So there's that complexity, but in essence, we've got about a 45-minute to maximum 1 hour, I would guess, travel time from city to the peripheries. And I've driven most of those roads because I've worked in a lot of secondary schools in Herefordshire and most of the market towns. So as I'm aware of those roads and how long it takes to get in and out. So we do rely upon a review by the our transport colleagues who are very helpful to try to make sure that they minimise those travel times, they minimise any stresses and strains on children, but they also try to keep that cost effective. So it's really important that we work with the transport team. When we put forward the strategy for internal scrutiny, I actually asked transport to model the costs of, for example, the sixth formers all travelling into the city to the New Beacon College, as opposed to some children and young people travelling to the school in the north and some to the city. And they modelled that with the children that were currently travelling. So that was the cohort that were currently using 16 to 19 education. And of course, that changes year on year. When they modelled that, they found that no child was going to be travelling any further distance or taking any longer time than the longest time taken at that point, which was about 48 minutes or 49 minutes or something for one child each way. They also said that if the transport routes were reviewed and we kept that efficient, that they didn't see any reason why that should be any more expensive than the situation we have currently. The only thing that would factor into the expenditure would be more children taking those journeys than we have. And we know that we've got pressure on numbers, so we are having more children that need specialist settings. That's why we're proposing modest increases in places. So in essence, the strategy supports the reduction of transport out of county, and it supports the review of the transport system and how it works for SEND, so that we have an efficient system. But the key thing for these children, we must remember, is that they are in the right place, and it's our responsibility to then get them there. The 16 to 19 transport is supported, of course, by parental contribution. So that's less of an issue for us. I think Les would probably like to talk about those children that we send out of county.
Yeah, okay. So there is a group of children with severe, complex and profound and multiple learning difficulties who may also have autism, and as a result of their non-verbal presentation often have challenging behaviours as they try and express themselves as to their needs and wants. So that's the small group that we find hardest to address the needs of within Herefordshire special schools. We do, and that is as much about family pressure and breakdown because of the needs of those children as it is about educational placement. Often they are placed residentially for care, and then the education follows. So, and I think it's going to be extremely difficult to meet the needs of that small group. However, we've also observed there are a group of children with autism who we are having to place outside the county in independent schools, where we think we have a possibility of developing provision to meet their needs, and that, of course, would, they make up about half of the number of children being placed in independent schools, and therefore, if we could address their needs, we would both reduce the cost of paying for those placements and the cost of transport, and the individual cost of transport for a child going, a single child going to a provider outside of the county can be as much as £80 to £100 a day. It can almost be as expensive as some of the educational provision. So, we are looking at that group with autism, but not severe learning difficulties, to see if we can develop a provision. There aren't sufficient numbers in county to merit a whole special school, because we have had this discussion with the local branch of the National Autistic Society, but we are going to work with them to try to develop some sort of provision that would reduce our dependence on independent external out-of-county providers.
Thank you, Les. I don't think, Councillor Harvey, do you have any further questions on that?
Well, just to ask, when was the last time that a review was undertaken of the SEND transport provision?
We undertook one for the strategy development, Liz. I'm not sure when the last routine review in the SEND by the SEND team with the transport group would have been conducted, but the one that we conducted was specifically for this strategy. But we're recommending within the strategy, as I mentioned, that certainly before, if the strategy is adopted, we would then need to review the transport situation again to make sure that it's been refreshed. But it's a difficult one because, as I said, the cohort is different so children from different locations within the authority come forward for that transport each year, and so the cohort is different. So I'm not sure whether the recommendation is feasible to expect that it's reviewed every year, or whether we should be looking to review that every 2-3 years, and that's a discussion that needs to be taken with the transport colleagues who would have to be doing that work.
Yeah, Kerry, you might have an answer. Yeah.
It's not an answer, it's an answer to a bit of Councillor Harvey's question. I think the last overall transport review, that's for all youngsters, not just SEND, was about 5 or 6 years ago. And I think it's timely to have a look at that again now. And I think the SEND group were part of this strategy, but I can't be honest about when that took place. I think it's much more recent than that. I think probably 2 or 3 years ago, Les, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the transport section review the routes very regularly in terms of sort of trying to rationalise them on a small scale. But I think that periodically, and I think that was 2 or 3 years ago. They do a full review of all of the routes to see if they need to make a fundamental change to the way that's done. I can't be exact on dates. I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
So, Councillor Harvey, do you think we should have another review of this?
Well, it sounds like it's timely, doesn't it? So,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I thought I had a communication recently saying that the whole county was covered every 5 or 6 years, and you did it bit by bit. So there was a survey being done for regular schools. Oh, maybe that's just going out for tendering. Yeah, I think that was the tendering, wasn't it, for third-party providers? Kerry, is that right?
I think that's right, Leader. But to answer Councillor Harvey's question, there are meetings already in the diary now that have not happened yet about starting the process of an overall county review of transport policy generally with the transport team, because I think it is time to start the ball rolling on a fresh look at that. The current policy does lead to some this is mainstream children as well as SEND, so I'm not talking SEND here. The current policy can lead to some quite quirky outcomes in some places, and it's perhaps not the best environmental impact either at the moment. So I think it is timely, Councillor, to have a look at this. We've started the ball rolling on some meetings with the transport team, but they've not yet happened. They happened next week or the week after, I think, from memory. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, any more questions, or shall I go to group leaders? Okay, I suppose the other question, which hasn't been asked very much about, is the current school in Leominster, Westfield, and the possible. Well, there's going to be consultation, isn't there, about whether the sixth form there should be closed. And I think you make your point, Sue, is to make it absolutely clear that this is there is consultation, no discussion, no decision has been made, and it's really up for grabs in the whole of that. So probably I don't need to labour that, because I think you answered it in your initial question. So I'll turn to first of all to Councillor Gandy, as chair of Children and Young People's Scrutiny Committee. Perhaps you'd like to.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, we welcome the specialist education plan. I think it's really important that we have a plan so that we aren't reactionary. And I think bearing in mind that the government has actually just given us some money for special educational needs, I think that works well with having the plan in place. Overall, most of the plan, the Scrutiny Committee absolutely supported, and I personally would echo the issue around Malcolm Green. I attend the Schools Forum meeting, and I know that the teachers and parent governors that attend that meeting speak very, very highly of the work that he does to ensure that the budget stays within where it should. Yeah, absolutely. For Westfield, the committee had a number of concerns. One of our co-opted members of the committee is in fact a governor at Westfield, and he spoke as a witness at the scrutiny meeting, and I had received correspondence from the head of the school. I think that they felt that it was a fait accompli, and that they were being consulted, but actually the decision had been made. And I was a little bit concerned when I was listening to Sue's presentation, that she was saying the recommendation is to close the sixth form, and that the consultation will be on the closure of the sixth form. Our understanding through scrutiny was that there would be a consultation which would run parallel with the feasibility studies, but that the feasibility studies would be for 2 to 16-year-olds and for 2 to 19-year-olds. It's obviously natural that parents whose children are already at the school, some of those parents have a fear of the unknown and concerns about children moving from one school to another rather than remaining in one building for the whole of their education. There is no doubt that Westfield is in a very poor condition, and it's almost impossible on the site that it's on at the moment to expand the size of the school, which would need to be done in order to bring it in line with the regulations that are required for people with disabilities. I think the problem is that anywhere that you move it to from Hereford, unless you move it further north, for the people who live either in the Leominster area or in the northwest of the county, the travelling is going to be longer. So at the present moment in time, for people in my ward who use Westfield, they would have a journey perhaps of 15 to 20 minutes. That will be more than doubled. And so there is obviously concerns. I recognise, and the committee recognise, that the north of the county is the only part of the county that still has a sixth form, and the other parts of the county have long since lost their sixth form. And although I understand that entirely, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong to keep a sixth form in Leominster. Some of these children obviously are have issues with toilet habits and such like, and an hour, 3/4 of an hour journey for some of them could be quite difficult. But I do recognise that the officers are in a difficult position in trying to accommodate 2 to 19-year-olds on a site which is not suitable for that situation. So unless we could find a site elsewhere in the Leominster area where we could build a SEND school that would cater for 2 to 19-year-olds, I believe there probably is no other option. But I do know that a lot of the parents and some of the staff have strong concerns about it.
Shall I pick that up, Leader? Yeah. Thanks, Carol. That's I know we rehearsed this and discussed this at scrutiny, didn't we? So thanks for just raising that again today. There's all sorts of issues that you've mentioned, but I'll just try and touch on them without being too lengthy. So if I'm rambling on, Leader, please stop me. The situation with consultation. The reason why we're having to run feasibility study alongside that consultation, not concurrently, is, as you know, I think, that we have an element of money to run this feasibility study, which is in the forward plan for this year, and we have to spend it, obviously commit to spending it and get that done. It's not about that necessarily, or only, because also, as you're aware, and you mentioned, the school is in a shocking condition. There are also some fire under compliances with regard to the current buildings that we have to put right. We're patching them up and we're doing our best at the minute, but we really need to support this school in having better accommodation. So the reason for the feasibility going forward is we've got the money and we have to act because we are so concerned about the school's condition. Alongside that, it would be wrong, entirely wrong of us as Children and Families Directorate to put forward a plan that for investment that included building a sixth form centre, a proper sixth form centre, with all of its attendant things that they should expect to have, such as a life skills flat, which the Beacon College has, such as their own therapy rooms, such as breakout spaces for socialising, which children should all have at 16 to 19 as approaching adulthood. They need different facilities. It would be entirely wrong for us to put forward a plan without being clear that it's the right thing to do, that included that sort of provision at probably upwards of a 1.5 million cost for what will realistically be a handful of children, maybe only 5 or 6 children, which in real terms is, for their independence alone, I as an ex-head teacher myself, I would be anxious if I wasn't encouraging that transition into adulthood that broadened horizons, that enabled young people to meet with and socialise with and learn with a larger group of their peers than 5 or 6. They may be very comfortable in that scenario, but I believe as educationalists that we should be encouraging those children and young people to absolutely strive for the best possible outcomes that they can achieve, regardless of the fact that they are SEND. They deserve the opportunity to be able to do that. And this college is wonderful. I know 2 councillors have very kindly agreed to come and be dragged around the site as it is at the moment, and I would encourage you all to visit and see it in development. It's going to be wonderful for those children and young people. And, you know, as you mentioned, that those children, even the ones with hygiene and toileting needs, they travel currently from our peripheral parts of the county, all over the county, apart from Leominster, to the city to have this sort of provision. So it's not a precedent that we're setting here that isn't already in place for the bulk of 16 to 19-year-olds. Those people that travel to Bars Court Hub, our 16 to 19 centre in Hereford City at the moment, travel, you know, right from the Gloucestershire border and so on. So it's doable. They have a brilliant travel training from their schools, so that they're also encouraged not just to, if they need to take transport, obviously they do, but not just that, to aspire, if possible, and if they're confident and comfortable, to actually get out into the adult world as independently as possible. And that's a wonderful thing. Sorry.
You got, yes, have you got, just very briefly, if you want to make any other.
Yeah. No, that's it. It's all about children's independence and giving them the best opportunities and spaces to learn in.
Yeah.
Councillor Hitchener, but I get the impression from what's just been said that there isn't going to be a feasibility study on 2 to 19. Now,
yes, there is.
There is.
Yes, I'll explain. As I said at scrutiny, the feasibility brief was written to encompass the need for 2 to 16 and possibly 2 to 19. So we have not closed any doors. That contractor will start their work and could proceed with that work until that consultation on the sixth form future is resolved. At the point it's decided one way or the other, the feasibility contractor will then be able to select either the 2 to 16 information or the 2 to 19 information to take forward as a proposal.
So I think the concern is your passion and your advocacy for Beacon College kind of takes over a little bit. And there's a bit of a question mark over whether you'd be open to a different kind of decision, but I think
it's not my decision. It's the consultation is a prescribed DFE process, leader. So that's not something that anyone influences. It has to be conducted in a certain way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for being passionate about Beacon College.
It's children, not the Beacon College, actually.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Could I just come in there very briefly to say that the Beacon College has a remit to work from its establishment. It has a remit to work back into local communities with young people, so that if they are based in the Leominster area or the Ross area, they wish to seek employment experience or other things in their own local area, then the Beacon will work with them on that. And secondly, Sue gave the impression that the schools offer the travel training. Actually, the travel training is a council service, but run through the schools, if that makes sense. So it is a service we have maintained, unlike some other counties, and as we feel it's extremely important for the life chances of our disabled students.
Yeah. Okay, so can I then move on? Kerry, did you want to very briefly?
Yeah, very briefly, just thank you. Just to try and reassure those of you concerned that this is a fait accompli. I have been invited out to the school by the head teacher at Westfield, Nikki Gilbert. Again, she wants to show me the sixth form provision. I'm going out next week, actually. I'm expecting her to make a passionate plea not to close the post-16 provision there. We've rehearsed this conversation a few times, I have to say, but I have offered her the chance to look at her current sixth form provision, which is not an all singing, all dancing sixth form block, folks. It's a couple of classrooms, just because I want to hear her views and those of her community one more time. So we are doing our best to listen to that as well. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, Nina. Thanks.
Okay, I'll move on then to Councillor James and then Councillor Lester, Councillor Matthews. So Councillor James.
Thank you, Leader. Listening is not always hearing. The last point, but that's a negative point. Can I just say that this is one area which I think Herefordshire has done well over many, many years. Never underestimate the importance of retaining those with physical difficulties within the mainstream. The benefits can be enormous, and I've personally seen that over many cases over many years. Herefordshire has had a good reputation in this area, but it's also the benefits that it gives to those students who have those pupils in amongst them, and the benefits it gives them. Children are much more supportive and helpful to people with difficulties today than they were in my youth. Young people in the county and in the society as a whole are much more caring of those less fortunate than themselves. And some of the most inspiring things I've seen over the years is how supportive their fellow pupils can be to those people with difficulties. I could tell you some amazing stories of how students have supported their fellow students over the years. I do think this is there will always be difficulties, and it isn't about money. It's about keeping as many as people as possible within the mainstream and the benefits, not only to those pupils, but to the community as a whole.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Lester.
Thank you. Yes, the Conservative group fully support the strategy. It's extremely important, and I've listened with interest to all of the comments that have been made. I think it's absolutely fantastic news about the Beacon College. I can remember when the grant money was won from the government and the decisions were made to go ahead and create this provision, which is just fantastic. And I know that Bars Court are going to do an excellent job in making sure that our young people who attend that college are going to get a fantastic education and great opportunities moving forward. And I note Mr. Knight's comment about the fact that the college will reach out to communities as well. So for me and for our group, that's a win-win. Just one small point about the strategy. I remember the overall strategy, and I note from the report, but I couldn't quite remember where I'd read it, that the overall capital investment strategy is going to be reworked. I understand the need for working on this part of the strategy in isolation because it deals with some specific issues, but I'm wondering, it's an open question really, but something for a cabinet member to bear in mind. Should this strategy then be incorporated into the overall strategy? So you've just got one document rather than an appendix that seems like it's in some way separate, because for me, this is integral to school provision. And I think one big all singing, all dancing document would benefit the council. That was all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Matthews.
Yeah, we likewise support the proposals for this very essential and vital service, Leader. And also my experience, I was talking to a couple of ed teachers back a few weeks ago, and how important it is that as many of these youngsters are incorporated into mainstream education. They're in their right surroundings, and I think that's extremely important, not only for them, but for their other children to see the situation and get to understand them. So I'm fully support that, and an excellent report, and it's nice to hear that we've got a very good reputation in respect of this particular issue. But Leader, as usual, it always concerns me when we suddenly say we're within budget, but we're getting near the line and all the rest of it, you know. That's fine. So can I just read this, please, and ask the officers to answer, please? The relevant guidance states that council should consider overall value including economic, environmental and social value when reviewing services? Can we be categorically assured that what's being proposed complies with these recommendations? I know officers have addressed it, Leader, but I thought I'd ask it officially from this side of the table so that they can tell us formally that that's the situation.
Kerry, we don't want to lose that point, so are you able to respond to that?
I'm going to hand to Sue because Sue's putting her hand up at the same time as me, Leader, if I may. But yes, I'll pass to Sue, but I think we can reassure Councillor Matthews on that. Thank you, Sue. Thank you.
Yeah, just very quickly. Within the strategy, there are obviously 6 or 7 proposals, and we have mentioned in the strategy that as these proposals are brought forward, we'd be bringing them forward in the way that all capital projects are brought forward. And there's a great deal of guidance in council policy about how to make sure that all of the proposals meet those criteria: best value, social value. Obviously, in all of the procurement documentation that goes out, there's always a requirement for contractors bidding for work that they do provide. It's clearly around best value in terms of how the procurement is run, but it's also about social value and how those contract and environmental value. And thanks to Councillor Chowns, we've got some strong terminology to use with regard to the environmental requirements of the council. But we've also got a social value question within every procurement exercise, which we rehearse with all of the tender applicants, and obviously that feeds into how those contracts are actually awarded. So the answer is we follow all council policy and procedure on that.
Thank you. I'll go next to Councillor Marsh, then Councillor Hardwick, and then Councillor Selden. Councillor Marsh first.
Yes, thank you. Yes, obviously the Green Group welcome this policy. I'm myself the ward member for Westfield, so I have a lively interest in this particular issue, and I'm delighted that Westfield is first on the list for upgrade, because yes, we're only too well aware of the state of the buildings. Just worth perhaps saying that because of Westfield's position right on the edge of the town, it has a very good relationship with the town. Even the most handicapped child can get or be got into the town within a few minutes. And so some of the facilities that may not be available on site are in a sense available because they can be accessed in the town. And I do hope that when the consultation is done, that we take an imaginative and creative look at whether some of the formal requirements may be met in slightly sideways ways, and also that we do our level best to continue to provide a site which does have that privileged access to the town, which is greatly valued by all concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Councillor Hardwick. Councillor Hardwick, do you?
Apologies, Chair, Leader. I was just distracted. Yes, the independent group are fully supportive of this. Obviously, a great deal of hard work has gone in by officers, and it's very heartening to hear that we're within budget, and you know, as a county, we are performing well in that regard. So I sort of look forward also to seeing the Beacon College coming online, and I for one would be interested in going and having a look at that at some time. But yeah, fully support the recommendations.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Selden.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, also fully supportive. As far as we're concerned, the Beacon College is the way forward. Really pleased to see that the review of the transport of young people with conditions is going to be reviewed, and I think that's a really important piece of work, because it's really not good to hear of them being transported around for over an hour at a time. But fully support this document. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Davis, your hand is up.
Yes, it is. Just a quick one. Is there no equality impact assessment with this strategy? Has it not been done? Because it would feel like this is a biggie for equalities.
Any officer care to comment on that?
My understanding is, sorry, Kerry, my understanding is that we look at the equality impact of each proposal as it comes forward as a singular entity. But Gemma, I'm more than happy to take advice from the equalities, our equalities colleagues, to see if there should be a statement more than is in the report already about equalities.
Yeah, so I'm equalities lead for the hospital, so there's a bit, and on the STP covering the council as well. And yeah, a policy like this, whenever there's a policy that's talking about it, you should be doing the equality impact assessment before you make any kind of proposals, because you then embed that into what you're going to develop. So if you see that there's a need within it, you then create that strategy to mitigate against those risks. So it's clear that you're discussing it within the paperwork. It's really clear that you are discussing that equalities, but I think for protection for both for the council, that needs to be put into an EIA that would be attached.
That's great, thank you. And I can call on you maybe for some advice if needed. Thank you.
Very much. Councillor Norman, I don't know whether you can address the question from Councillor Lester about having one policy rather than several. Whether you could share that at the same time as your comment.
I think officers can probably confirm that, but my understanding is that this is part of, you know, an umbrella, a wider policy for schools. So perhaps they can confirm that. I just wanted to add a couple of points, really, if everyone had a say. Thank everyone for their views and comments and contributions, and in particular, perhaps that last one. I mean, I think you're right. Within this, equality is the key, and the whole strategy is focused on ensuring that there is equality of opportunities in education for children across the county, specifically, and that is where we run into not difficulties, but you know, the whole issue of what we provide at Westfield in Leominster is a case in point. There will be a discussion, a balancing to achieve that equality of opportunity for all children, but it may be different to what has been the case currently, and that's not an easy one. Clearly it's not an easy one, but as Sue has said, Beacon College is an opportunity, a fantastic opportunity with the sort of facilities that really would be almost impossible to duplicate on another site, certainly not without massive expenditure. Do go and have a look. I've been to have a look round. It is going to be fantastic. I think we've all seen the virtual whiz round or had that opportunity, and that's very impressive too. But it's actually being on site and seeing how it's coming along that will, I think, convince you that this is going to be great for the county and hopefully for all young people. And we really do want them to have the best possible opportunities to move towards adulthood with the support and you know, development that they will need in that case. But yes, it's a good one. We know it's there, the ability focus, but we need it to be seen to be there, is I think what you're saying, Gemma. So I'm very much in favour of that. And I think also transport's been a theme running through all of this. It's key, as it is to all schooling really, but perhaps even more important in the case of our children with particular needs. So it's certainly been on the agenda. It's something we need to push forward and work on and make sure we absolutely get that as well as we possibly can. Thank you. And thank you for support and contributions that you've been making.
Okay, I was hoping to bring this to a conclusion now for the Cabinet, but
right. Could I have Leader, could I just ask to clarify a small point? There says there's a review of school transport. Is that special needs or school transport generally, please?
Kerry, would you like to answer that
Hopefully
one?
all, but special needs.
Thank you, Councillor Norman. All special needs. Can I just offer a final comment very briefly, Leader, if I may?
Yes.
I just want to thank people for their contributions. Yes, I understand why it might seem as if you've got an SEND capital strategy is a bit stand apart from mainstream. That's just a function of the fact that Les and Sue started the work on this almost 3 years ago, and we refreshed the capital overall strategy. We started it again about 18 months to a year ago. So we will try and blend it. That's why it feels as a separate thing. We will try and blend it. But just to say that I thank you for your comments. That the county is really well placed here. Beacon College is a very exciting initiative, and a new Westfield is too, actually, I think. So to answer the question about transport, yes, we want to look at all of it, not just the SEND bit, but we're very early in that bit of the process. But it's a great time to be doing this, I would suggest, because actually you could end up with 2 really cracking provisions here, given that the quality of provision in terms of teaching and leadership is already good. Of course, this provides you with good estate as well to work with. So thank you, Leader. Thanks for your patience. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Carrie. I think it's not about the buildings, is it? It's about the teaching and the passion of the people who are leading and that kind of stuff. And we're very fortunate to have people like that here. So thank you, everybody. So I'll put, if I may, put the recommendation to the Cabinet, which is the Cabinet adopts the approach and recommendations within the Herefordshire Capital Investment Strategy 2021 to 2030 for specialist settings educating children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities. So I will put that recommendation. I think we have a vote on that. Is that right, Jenny?
Yes, Leader. Non-voting members are just moving out of the room. I've got 7 Cabinet members voting. Councillor Tyler did drop out about 10 minutes ago.
Okay. Okay, put the voting screen up. Thank you.
Leader, those have been unanimously accepted.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks, everyone.
Well, thank you everyone for attending. The next meeting of this group is the Thursday, the 27th of May. We have another meeting next on Tuesday, and then we have the full council annual general meeting towards the end of May as well. So a busy May and April, and it's sun shining out there, I think. So for those who don't have further meetings to go to, enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much. Bring the meeting to an end. Will you?